it's time for us to look at some basic proofs involving solving equations. So for this first one, we're going to solve 2x plus 5 equals 20 minus 3x. When you do these in your homework, you won't need to do the explanation part. Just worry about writing the equation and writing the reason. So this is just for demonstration purposes. We start off by looking at writing the original equation, and whenever we write down what's given to us, our reason will always be given. So when you do proofs in general, the first thing you want to do is write whatever's given to you, and the reason will be because it's given. So you just write the word given. The next step, we want to add 3x to both sides. If we do that, it looks something like this. And our reason for this, since we're adding something to both sides of the equation, would be the addition property of equality. Now, the next thing we'd want to do is to combine like terms, and you can use that as a reason, but a better reason, the reason I don't like, is this one right here, which is simplify. Instead, what I would use as a reason, and I'll explain why, is distributive property. And you don't need to write out the steps for this, but I'll explain why distributive property works here. Alright, so when we have 2x and 3x, if we write 2x plus 3x, we can factor out an x, and we're left with 2 plus 3. And if we combine those two, we end up with our 5x. So it's really a reverse distributive property here that we're using. So whenever you combine like terms, just go ahead and write our reason as distributive property. The next step we'd want to do is subtract 5 from both sides. And if we subtract 5 from both sides, it looks like this. Of course, since we subtracted 5 from both sides, our reason would be subtraction property of equality. Final step is to divide each side by 5. If we do that, we get our answer, which is x equals 3. Since we divided each side by 5, our reason would be the division property of equality. We're going to do a couple of these, so just watch what I do. For this next one, of course, we start again by looking at writing our original equation, which is negative 4 times the quantity x, or 11x plus 2 equals 80, and our reason, like I said before, is given. Next, we want to distribute the negative 4. If we distribute the negative 4, we end up with negative 44x minus 8 equals 80. And since we distributed the negative 4, we're using the distributive property. Our next step, we want to add 8 to both sides. If we add 8 to both sides, it's going to look like this. And since we added something to both sides of the equation, it's the addition property of equality. Finally, if we divide both sides by negative 44, we end up with x equals negative 2. And again, since we divided, oops, sorry, I'll go back one. Since we divided, we use the division property of equality. If you notice, when we do proofs like this, eventually it's almost the same type of proof over and over again. So you'll see the same types of reasons being given over and over again. Try to keep that in mind when you're doing proofs, that you're going to use the same types of properties over and over again. Alright, for this next one, there's a lot of words here. It just says, when you exercise, your target heart rate should be 50 to 70 of your maximum heart rate. So your heart rate R at 70% can be determined by using this formula, where A is your age in years. So we're just doing the same thing. Here's our equation. We want to solve this for A. So we start off again writing the original equation, which is here, and the reason is given. Same way we've started the last two. Our first step, if we want to get A by itself, we want to multiply that out, and there's more than one way to do this. If we multiply it out, we end up with this. So here we have, if we do 0.70 times 220, we get 154. 0.7 times negative A gives me negative 7A. 70A. It's negative 0.7A, sorry. Since we distributed to get that. That's the distributed property. We want to get a by itself, so our next step is to subtract 154 from both sides. If we do that, we end up with r minus 154 equals negative 0.7a. And of course, since we subtracted, we use the subtraction property. Our next step is to divide both sides by the negative 0.7. If we do that, this is what our equation looks like. We divided both sides by the same thing. That's the division property. Hopefully you're starting to see that these are all basically the same types of problems. Here's one more, I believe. We want to solve this equation and write a reason for each step. We start off, same old thing, write the equation. Our reason is it's given. We're going to add 3x to both sides. It's going to look like this. Our reason is the addition property. We're going to subtract 9 from both sides. If we do that, we end up with 7x equals negative 7 using the subtraction property for that step. And then we divide both sides by 7. And we get x equals negative 1. That's the division property. One more, I believe. So here's one more. We're going to start out, again, same as usual. We write out the equation. Our reason is given. We need to use the distributive property to distribute out the 3. So we'd end up with this using the distributive property. We're going to combine like terms. Again, I would call this the distributive property as well. It says simplify. You can say combine like terms, but I would prefer if you use the distributive property, because 14x minus 3x gives me 11x. Again, I don't like their reason here. Rather than link the same value, just use say distributive property instead of link the same value. Now we're going to subtract 21 from both sides. We end up with this. Subtraction property of equality. Dividing both sides by 11. We'll end up with our answer. And we use the division property of equality. Oh, one more. Sorry. So we're going to solve this for b. We start out the same way, write the equation, and it's given. We're going to start our first step. We're going to multiply both sides by 2. If we multiply both sides by 2, the 1/2 will cancel. We'll end up with 2a equals bh. We use the multiplication property of equality. We're going to divide both sides by h. And if we divide both sides by h, we end up with our answer, which is b equals 2a over h. We use the division property here. And that's it. Thanks.